Hello, today we'll talk about the role and importance of materials and technology for curriculum development. First of all, we need to see that the process of selecting materials is an important part of curriculum development once we have already selected our syllabus that establishes the contents that we're going to teach and the order in which we're going to teach them. So, at this moment, we can decide on adapting, or designing a set of teaching materials. It goes without saying that materials are extremely important because they will facilitate a teacher's job, and so we must make sure that they are appropriate and of good quality. Let's start by giving a definition of materials. According to Tomlinson, materials refers to anything which is used to help language learners to learn. And materials can be in the form, for example, of a textbook, a workbook, a CD-ROM, a video, a photocopied handout, a newspaper, a paragraph written on a whiteboard. In short, anything that presents or informs the learners about the language that they are learning. Now, before we discuss the kinds of materials that are available, their characteristics, and their advantages and disadvantages, let's begin by exploring your preferences. The questions that I have for you are: number 1, what are your favorite materials? Why do you like them? Number 2, what are your least favorite materials? Why don't you like them? Number 3, what do you think about the teaching materials that we use in our school? And finally, concerning our textbook Empower series, what are the advantages and disadvantages that you see in them as a language learner? Now, if you explore your preferences, you will see that your favorite materials are those that contain authentic language, interesting topics, the ones that may engage you into meaningful interaction with your classmates, those that involve some kind of competition or discovery, and these, in general, are the ones that are provided by the teacher as an addition to the classic materials. And of course, your least favorite materials will be the classic materials. And the things that you will hate are, for example, the exercises on the textbook, everything that is related to the direct study of language aspects such as grammar or vocabulary, and those that do not allow you to interact with other people. So, there are advantages and disadvantages, and specifically textbooks are the materials that are most commonly used, and we need to make sure that when we select them, they are adapted to the learner's needs and interests. So, let's begin by talking about textbooks. Textbooks can come in many forms, for example, printed materials, non-print materials, or both print and non-print materials. This means that a textbook may include a workbook, worksheets, a teacher's guide, some readers for the students, but they may also include audio files for the listening comprehension exercises, some videos with activities, and probably computer-based materials such as software for a smartboard. In some cases, there will be both print and non-print materials. For example, there may be self-access materials, an internet platform, for example, or all kinds of multimedia to be used in a self-access center. So it is important to know that today's textbooks are very well developed, and they include a variety of other media that will complement the teacher's job. It is important to mention that the number one choice for most institutions' curriculum options are textbooks. Now, this is the case because textbooks have a number of advantages for teachers, for the learners, and for the institution itself. For the teachers, a textbook constitutes the syllabus. That means that he or she will know exactly what content to teach. There will be also a suggestion of a methodology or a teacher's guide where the authors explain how the textbook is going to be used. So this means that it's going to be like a source for basic teaching skills. And most texts today include also an assessment component. So the teacher will have a syllabus, a methodology, and an assessment that are already ensured, and he will not have to work extra hours trying to complement these options. The advantages for the learners are that textbooks provide appropriate input, graded practice according to the level and the kind of learner. The textbook will also provide resources for self-study and very important language information about grammar rules, about vocabulary, about culture, about different elements of the target language. And finally, for the institutions, the textbooks will facilitate the task of developing a curriculum, because normally the textbook series already provide a coherent curriculum for the institution, as well as a way of standardizing instructions so that everybody knows what they're supposed to teach. And finally, as we said before, the test and the assessment. So everything is included in the same package, and that's why textbooks are so advantageous. However, there are some limitations to the use of textbooks that will be outlined here. First of all, most, if not all, textbooks will contain non-authentic language. The language in the textbooks is going to be manipulated precisely for pedagogical purposes. Everything needs to be graded and controlled. Thus, the language in a textbook will be very artificial. The second thing, the textbook is adapted to a Western view of teaching. This means that because textbooks are produced in countries such as England, the United States, or Australia, they will advocate a way of teaching that is very particular of a Western civilization, and they may not be adapted to other kinds of cultures. The third disadvantage is that because textbooks are produced for a global market, they are very unlikely to match your learners' needs. Everybody in the world is different. There are different ages, different interests, different cultures, and therefore, when textbooks are produced to fit everybody's needs, the truth is that they fit no one's needs. A fourth disadvantage concerns the fact that the textbooks present a sanitized view of the world. Normally, middle-class people, it's focused on consumption, entertainment, and things that may not be very relevant for different kinds of learners or for developing a critic view of the world. The fifth disadvantage, of course, is that textbooks contain a lot of elements, so they are very likely to de-skill teachers. The teachers will become less competent because they no longer have to find out the materials by themselves, to develop activities, to be creative. The final disadvantage is that textbook will rather advocate a transmission-oriented approach to teaching. This means that everything needs to be reproduced in the same way, very mechanical, very non-creative, and this is the problem when we use textbooks. An alternative to compensate for the limitations of textbooks is the use of authentic materials. They could be texts, photographs, music, realia, videos, and in general, everything that was not originally created for teaching purposes. There are many advantages to the use of authentic materials. First of all, they contain authentic language. They were not designed for teaching, they were designed for communication. The second advantage is that they reflect real-world language use. So, if you take a newspaper article or a documentary from the Discovery Channel, all of this will inform the learner about how the language is really used for communicating in a real context. They will include important discourse, pragmatic, and sociolinguistic elements that cannot be found in regular textbooks. The third advantage is that they have a positive effect on learners' motivation. Authentic materials were designed for entertainment and information, and therefore they will be much more interesting than anything that you can find on a published textbook. The fourth advantage is, of course, that they provide authentic cultural information. There is so much to learn from an authentic document that you will definitely not find in a textbook. Everything in a textbook is produced just for teaching purposes, whereas authentic materials include cultural, scientific, and educational information that will be very important as a complement for the learner's development. Another very important advantage, of course, is that authentic materials relate more closely to the learner's needs and interests. So this means that the topics that you will find will be more adapted because they will also be like real world language that you're using in a particular moment, and that will contain information that is more interesting for the learner's needs and interests. We need to say, however, that the disadvantage of authentic materials is that they cannot be used the way they are. The teacher needs to spend a great deal of time finding them, first of all, selecting them, adapting them to the use in the classroom, and then, of course, assessing or evaluating the effectiveness of these materials. Therefore, the teacher will have much work to do than if he or she would use just a published textbook. So, authentic materials are very advantageous, but they will also present a challenge for the teacher. Well, this was the first part on materials and technology in curriculum development. Thanks a lot for your attention, and I will be seeing you next time.